You can't wait for that call, but you do have to suffer. Suffer for the page, suffer for the music, suffer for good. Welcome to Channel 8.5.
Hello and welcome back to Channel 8.5, a podcast about film, television, and pop culture. My name is Andrew Hanna.
My name is Joe Galino.
This week is a Watchlist episode. So Joe, what did we watch this week?
It worked out pretty serendipitously, and I actually just realized this.
Hmm.
It's a biopic week here at Channel 8.5.
Oh my God, I didn't even realize that.
Yes, indeed. We're talking about the Netflix series Selena.
Yep.
About the famed Tejano singer Selena. We're talking about Mank, also a Netflix original. We're really shilling for Netflix today. And then we're going to be talking about, and with, one of the filmmakers involved with a documentary called Suffer for Good.
Yeah, so we'll be having our very first guest on the show, David Fisch. He'll be talking with us about the documentary he produced and edited that came out last week. But let's go ahead and start with Selena. Did you see the original J-Lo movie?
I did see it. I saw it once, as many probably saw it, I don't know, in my middle school Spanish class. The best place to absorb movies. Yes. That's the only time I've seen it.
Skimpy J-Lo in Spanish class.
To be fair, that Spanish teacher wasn't a very good teacher, and she was fired the year later. I'm not kidding.
Oh, really?
She was also the French teacher, and she would often just start speaking in French during Spanish class without knowing, and we'd all go, what's going on?
Okay, you have to excuse her for that because my mom does that to Christina constantly. She'll just talk at her in Arabic, and Christina's looking at her yeah.
Yes, I agree.
And then Marina and I have to look at my mom and be like, Ma, you're speaking in Arabic. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Christina.
She should just start saying random sentences that don't pertain to what your mom was saying just out of the blue. Be like, you know what? I do like blue cheese. You're right.
Oh, she does do that now. Now she actually just talks back at what she thinks she meant. And a lot of times, 80% of the time, she's right.
Just nod and agree.
Exactly. She's like, oh no, I do actually like that, or blah, blah, blah. And Marina and I are about to tell my mom, and we look at Christina wait, what? So we're teaching our light addition to the family how to speak Arabic, or at least the vibe of Arabic.
Just match the energy. You're fine.
Yeah, just match the energy.
I remember not having very strong feelings towards the Selena movie. It got very intense at the end, because I think we can spoil Selena the movie because it's a real story. It follows the singer Selena as her rise to stardom through her teenage years into when she's ultimately killed by her manager when she's in her mid-20s. There's a very intense scene at the end of the movie Selena, the J-Lo one, where it's just her manager crying and sobbing in a car. And that is all I remember from the movie. I ultimately don't remember liking it that much. And I remember that scene vividly going, you know what? This is maybe a tough watch. I don't think I want to revisit this.
I probably would have never watched the original film if it wasn't for my cousins who love the movie. So they introduced her to us. So my sister and I would watch it with them every time we'd go over in the summer and things like that. And, at first I wasn't completely fond of it. I learned to love it. Just kind of rubs off on you.
It really Stockholm syndromed you.
In a way, right? And the music kind of just started sticking in my head. Till today, I can still sing, late at night when all the world, it'll get stuck in my head at times. And
sure, that is a song. I believe you because I don't know a Selena song. I come into this as a completely blank slate. I don't know anything about Selena. I really have no memories of the Jennifer Lopez movie. To me, Selena is just an ethereal figure that exists out there. She's just around, but I have no connection to her.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense, right? Selena is very important to a lot of people. And
oh, yes,
rightfully so. It really is an amazing story. I mean, the struggles her family went through. And, I think that the way that they portrayed it in this was pretty good.
And they go into them in Selena the series over and over again in great detail, whether you want them to or not.
Well, and that's the thing, is that it felt like they were really trying to stretch this story to fit multiple seasons. And I really think that this could have been The Queen's Gambit, a short run, 10 episodes, and you would have been able to tell a story that was already told in only 2 hours. So this story can be condensed, and this was just, it felt very obviously stretched out. After the first episode, I was like, okay, I get it. They're struggling. All right, I understand. And I'm all for the underdog story, but it felt a little bit too much. And, it stalls in a lot of places. Where I started to like it, or at least not hate it, was in the second episode when the brother goes to
A very famous
a
Tejano
very famous.
songwriter
Yeah,
who
exactly.
he's the, like, the kingmaker. If he gives you a
Mhm.
song, boy, you know, you're gonna get a record deal, you're gonna get played on the radio. This dude is the dude you want if you're an up and coming artist.
Yeah, and meanwhile, the father is trying to convince a producer to produce a record with them, and he's telling him, "Oh, we have some of Luis Silva's songs," and the brother is telling Luis Silva, "We have this producer."
By the way, the scene you're describing, it's a cutting
Mhm.
scene between the son talking to this guy at an awards show and the father talking with a record executive who he knows, and it is honestly the best scene in the entire show. I think so. It's the one that has the most momentum. It also emphasizes the father and son relationship, and I think that the part of this that does work the best, oddly enough, are not the Selena bits. It is the father, Ricardo Chavira.
Yeah, it felt like a show about the father.
Yes.
That occurred to me in the 3rd episode where I was like, "Okay, I wonder if it's going to start shifting to Selena," but it really did feel like a biopic about the father more than anything, really.
And you know what? I liked him, and I thought he was the best part of it.
Mexican Ray Liotta, I loved him.
He really was. I mean, he's in a bunch
Right?
of stuff. He's a that guy, but I
Yeah,
knew him
yeah.
from Desperate Housewives, but he's been in a bunch of stuff.
He really is great relative
Oh, yeah,
to the people around
what he
him.
gets
Yeah.
to do. He spends a lot of the time just looking down and frustrated, and maybe I liked him so much because I recognized that look from my father when I was growing up, just, like, exasperated and just, like, kind of almost like a cartoon character where steam is coming out of his ears, but he's not gonna yell at you, but he's like, "Ugh, why are these kids so dumb?"
But they also had a lot of these contrived inspirational moments. Some of them work. Like I love the moment where the sister decides to switch the song from the English song when they go to Mexico for the first time and Selena has just won the vocalist of the year and she really wants to sing an English song and her dad's like, "I really don't think you should." And she's like, "If I win, can I sing it?" And he says, "Yes." And then so he does it and then the people of Mexico are like, "What the hell is this? We came to see Selena the Tejana singer. Like why are you singing to us an English song?" And then so the sister, who was never really big on playing the drums, never really embraced it, was always kind of crapped on by her brother because she didn't love it. And so she wasn't great at it because of that reason. And she has this flashback of, what the father is saying. He's like, "Well, switch up the song, switch it up quickly." And the brother's saying, "Oh, well, she can't switch the beat up that quickly." And so she has this moment in the middle of the performance where she's like, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to switch the song. This isn't working. This is going to save us." And she does. And it's this really great moment of triumph for the sister. And so I feel like it's almost like the stories around Selena are great, but Selena's story herself, at least I didn't watch the entire thing. I only watched the first 3 episodes, but thus far it doesn't feel as though Selena's really the focus.
The problem I think that people have with this is that it's called Selena, and Selena isn't the focus. It should be called Selena y los Dinos,
Hmm.
but that wouldn't draw people in. That's not what Netflix wants. Netflix
No,
wants people to watch a show about Selena,
and I think that that might come in later seasons.
more than
I
likely.
think the first season makes sense to revolve around the family because they are sort of the driving force in her life in the beginning. And she wasn't any particular interesting person probably when she was younger. It wasn't until she got older that she really embodied that diva, that star personality. But Christian Serratos, she was doing well. Like I loved her lighthearted disposition. I think she did that very well, where she was almost like this carefree girl.
She's very charming.
Very charming, but it felt like she was doing an impression of J-Lo doing an impression of Selena.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to make that
Like, at
comparison.
at times, I was like, "Oh, this feels like," and maybe that was how Selena was, and I watched a few interviews, and J-Lo's rendition of Selena was actually very like, the tone of voice fits so perfectly with Selena's voice, and so it almost felt like Serratos was trying to do that, and she did a great job, I think. If J-Lo hadn't preceded her, she might have nailed it, but I think that performance was stuck in my head the entire
She
time.
did a great job doing exactly what they clearly asked her to do, which is be charming, to be kind of an annoying little sister in the beginning, but not so much that you don't like her.
I don't think she was even annoying necessarily.
Sometimes she got on her sister's
And
nerves, and sometimes,
yeah,
siblings fight, but ultimately, we still love Selena because she's got that golden smile and those pipes.
and honestly, a lot of the touching moments and funny moments felt very contrived. Like they wrote it as a funny or emotional scene, and all the performances or the writing just couldn't match it. So they just used the music, hoping it would fill in the gaps. Like it didn't feel authentic in any way or natural. Some scenes did, like the scene with the father and the son when they're trying to kind of haggle their way into the
Those
industry in
the
a sense.
father and the son scenes, again, to me, because it's all I have as a frame of reference, felt the most natural because there would be times where the father and son, Abraham and AB,
Mhm.
Abraham's the dad, AB is the son. Abraham would turn to him, say something. AB would go, "Well, I don't know, dad." And he'd go, "Just do it," and then walk away. Be like, and AB just be standing there going, "Okay, guess I gotta do this now." Like when he's diving into the dumpster for lights, literally,
Oh, that was
literally,
so messed up.
Abraham just goes, "Yeah, get in there, boy. Find those lights."
No, I love when he says, "I was in the army. What did you do?" And I was like, "Damn, dude, that's cold." You
Cold-blooded.
straight up used your military experience to send your son dumpster diving.
Or when they're going, "Well, we need new songs," and Abraham goes, "Well, just write them." And he's like, "I can't write them." He's like, "Yes, you can. Shut up."
No, that was a sweet scene. I actually really like that scene.
He
Here's the
basically
thing.
just shuts him down. He's like, "Yeah, you can. You're gonna do it. Go ahead." And then just keeps on driving and doesn't say anything else.
Well, I think went a lot harder on him to try to get him to get the songs from that big songwriter,
Yeah.
and I think that the father did a great job in the sense that you didn't necessarily completely dislike him because he was a stage father. It almost felt as though he saw something in his kids that he couldn't necessarily communicate to anyone else, and so he just communicated it in just working them to the bone, and it feels cruel at some points, but at the same time, it really does end up paying off. And someone like Selena, who loves what she does, he helps her get to that point, and it feels like he put everything on the line for a dream that he may have once had,
He didn't accomplish. He's living vicariously through them.
but I don't think he's the archetypal stage father, because if you look at it from his perspective, he's a descendant of immigrants. He worked hard, likely put aside his dreams of being a musician because it wasn't quote unquote stable, bought the restaurant, and then loses it all in one fell swoop because of a recession. So he's probably thinking, I did everything right to fulfill my part of the American dream, and it's all gone now. So at this point, what was considered a practical route to take is no longer viable or even stable. So he puts all of his weight behind his children because he sees something in them. Like when he has that conversation with his brother and he says, have you heard her sing?
Yeah.
She's not like me. She can make it. Like I actually, and it's almost as though he realized why he never made it and that she has the very thing that he may have been lacking. And so he's like, oh, I'm not letting her or the kids really drop this. And so I think he plays the line very well to where you don't completely hate him, but you also don't think that he's the best father ever. Like they didn't really have a normal childhood.
And they do that over and over again. 9 episodes was too many. I did like that the episodes were around 35 to 40 minutes, most of them. Nice and tight 35 minutes, but there were 9 of them. This could have easily been 6 episodes. Even if they kept it at the exact same spot where they ended it, there's a subplot where Selena starts dating a guitarist from the band who was hired from outside the family. That would have been an
Yeah, that
odd.
was in the movie.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, exactly. You've seen the
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. I know her
You
story. I
know the
don't think you
story.
can really spoil it, yeah. I just didn't wanna go too far because also Christina wanted to watch it together, and I was like, "I'll just watch the first 3 episodes, be able to talk about it,"
She
and
knows
then
how it ends too,
yeah.
but it ends with their love being discovered by her father and her father throwing him out of the bus at a gas station and then leaving them. It's a very dramatic scene because they're all yelling and crying. But I was just like, you left the dude at a gas station in the middle of the desert. Like, damn, man. Couldn't even drop him at the bus station.
This is little girl, man.
And that's it. Credits.
Fade to black. Did you like this?
Did I like this? I didn't hate it. I didn't mind that it was about Selena and the family as opposed to just Selena the star.
Yeah.
And I have no relationship to Selena the real life singer. So to me, I was just thinking, "Hey, this is a nice family drama that went on too long." But everybody the performances are good and charming.
Eh,
I liked Abraham. I liked Ricardo Shavira. So overall, I didn't love it, but I didn't hate
yeah.
it. I thought it was fine. Would I watch it again? No. Am I excited for the second season? No.
Yeah, I think I came out with the same impression. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. I feel like she deserved better. I think
I feel like it deserves better than the basically critical panning that it is getting. I think that people are lambasting this thing and saying it's just absolutely awful, there's no redeeming qualities about it. I don't think that's true. I like it more than that, but I also don't think it's great.
Yeah, I'm cutting it some slack because there are some scenes that didn't necessarily I honestly didn't like the performances that much. I thought the acting wasn't great and it almost felt a lot of it was lazy. It felt lazy because I think they knew that people were going to watch it no matter what. And that part of it really frustrates me because I think the story is a good story and can be told very cinematically, especially someone like Netflix has the means to tell the story. I don't think it should have been a multi-season
No.
show. I mean, this could have been a mini series and they would have been
Queen's Gambit's a perfect example.
yeah, and that's the frustrating part is that they were stretching it out, they were diluting it because they knew people were gonna continue watching it. They knew that she has the fans, and so they split it in the way that they split the last Harry Potter and the way that they split the last Twilight. I don't know why I'm talking about Twilight on the show,
You
but
wanna know why you're talking about Twilight? Because Christian Serratos was in Twilight.
yeah, yeah.
She
She was
was
in The
in
Walking
all
Dead
of
too.
them. She was in The Walking Dead. She's been in a lot of things that I honestly have not seen.
No, I think check it out if you like Selena. If you want to see more of Selena, this is a good show for you. Obviously, I think people who really like Selena aren't really going to be necessarily bothered. I think they're going to be glad that they are going to continue to get more Selena years down the line. I just think that they deserved better, and I think Selena deserved better. I think it is a great story, and could be told well. But
Look, Netflix isn't stupid. They know if they put Selena on their front homepage, people are gonna click on it, and it's gonna stay in the top 10, which is not something that can be said for the next Netflix thing that we're gonna talk about, Mank, because
Mank.
that was not in the top 10 at Netflix very long at all. And to be honest, I don't know who this movie's for. Let's move on to Mank.
Did you like this? It sounds like you didn't.
No, I really liked this.
Okay, I think from what I'm getting from you, you're about to say what I am thinking.
Separating the business aspect of this, the Netflix getting people to watch aspect from the actual thing that was made. I really, really enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed it because it's a subject matter that I personally am interested in, that I
Yeah,
don't think anybody else, other than
yeah,
maybe you,
yeah,
is interested in. So,
yeah.
how this movie got made could only be done on Netflix with the scale that it's made
Mhm,
with.
mhm. No, I agree with that.
Do you agree? Is that basically what you were gonna say too?
Well, what I was gonna say is I loved it despite feeling as though I need to watch it again to really appreciate it because I don't know what this was. Because it wasn't a love letter to old Hollywood, and it also wasn't completely damning, it just is. How do you even explain Mank? Like, you
I
can
was gonna ask you this question too. Okay, what is this movie about?
obviously it's a story about how Citizen Kane was written. I mean, that's the log line. And it almost felt as though it was a colder version of Trumbo. I mean, it was basically Trumbo because Trumbo had a great balance of politics and
Mhm.
Hollywood history and sort of how those two circles intermingled. I mean,
Yeah,
all around, this was made for me, be it the film history,
yeah.
but also the political aspects. And it took me by surprise that David Fincher was sort of entering the political conversation by way of this film to draw comparisons and similarities between what is happening now in our politics and what was happening in the 1930s and 40s. That even then, there were the same conversations and talking points about socialism and the strategic muddling of the line between communism and socialism, down to fake news in that MGM was literally putting out misleading newsreels to sway an election away from someone who was branded as a socialist and was previously projected to win, ended up losing because of those reels.
It is strangely and accidentally very, very relevant to today. I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. If you don't know what Mank is, because probably most people don't, and probably you didn't watch it on Netflix because evidently nobody did. Mank is set in 1930s Hollywood. It's about Herman J. Mankiewicz, the other co-writer of Citizen Kane, and the process of how he wrote Citizen Kane. Most people know Citizen Kane as Orson Welles' baby, directed and written by. Citizen Kane, as it's presented in this story, was originally conceived by Herman J. Mankiewicz, and then Orson Welles again came on later, changed some things. But it's the story of Mankiewicz writing that screenplay. Kind of, but also not really. I would say that if I was going to describe what this movie's about, it's not about something happening, because not a lot happens.
Hmm.
It's about a jaded Hollywood screenwriter who just learns to care a little bit. because ultimately Mank, he's part of this system where if you didn't know in the 30s, studios would just hire a stable of writers and they would just go, okay, writers, write this movie about a weird, giant monkey that takes over New York and it becomes King Kong.
Yeah, like the studio system was not what it is today. It was almost corporatized. It was structured like a business in a sense. They had
It was
employees, so they
very
had
factory fed.
they had writers, they had actors, crew on their payroll, and then they would just pump out movies in the same way that a factory pumps out products. And so it's not like it is now because now it's kind of on a contract basis.
A
You're
freelance
almost
basis
working as a
almost.
freelancer. Yeah. And so he's beginning to become jaded in the way that all of Hollywood became jaded at that time, which is what led to the 60s and 70s revolution of the system
Oh,
in a
he's not
sense.
beginning to be jaded. In the beginning of the movie, he's already very jaded by the system.
But with the flashbacks, you kind of see the progression of how he just further becomes more and
True.
more. I think we're meeting him on the tail end of his career in a sense, and he has the realization of looking at his brother and saying, "I'm washed up," and then he looks at him and he says, "This is the best thing you've ever written," and that is what sort of makes him care in a way. Is that
Because the job that he got to write Citizen Kane was like every other job he ever got. He was just told, "Yeah, write this biopic about some guy." And then all of a sudden he realizes, "Oh, this is really great. I should take credit for this." Because writers back in that time would get credit for things. They were credited writers, but they were kind of written by committee a lot like TV shows are now. Some writers would just come on, write an entire script, never get credit for it. And that's what Mank ultimately fights for at the end is just getting his name on Citizen Kane. And the last scene is very, very funny in that Orson Welles is not in this a lot. He's only in
yeah,
about 2 scenes.
which is good because I mean
I
he
agree.
does look like him and sound like him, but if you would have gone a little bit too far, it would have become about Orson Welles and whether or not he portrayed him correctly.
I really like Welles. I'm a big fan, so I've listened to a lot of Orson Welles talk and a lot of it's great listening to Orson Welles talk. He's a wonderful storyteller, but a lot of what he tells are stories. I've talked about this before, and a lot of them might be apocryphal. Who knows how true they are? But at the end, the thing that Orson Welles is most angry about isn't that he wants credit for a thing he wrote. It's more that he broke his contract. And then they have a very big argument at the end. And Orson Welles comes in and he picks up like a portable bar and slams it against the wall in very Orson Wellesian style. And then they kind of stop in the middle and they're like, "Oh, that would be good for the movie." I'm like, "Oh yeah, it would be good for the movie." But I'm still very angry at you, Mank.
Well, and that's the thing is that this was Orson Welles' debut as a filmmaker, and he made Mank basically sign a contract saying, "You're not going to take credit. This is going to be my baby, so that Hollywood takes me in."
Mhm.
And when he sees that that's at stake, he kind of starts getting pretty pissed off about it. But David Fincher's dialogue scenes have always had an edge, but it feels like something happened after he and Sorkin worked together because in this, it is just so refined and so much fun to watch.
It's
Like
shot like an old movie. It's shot like a movie from that period. The performances are also like that, where everybody's very rat-tat-tat. Everybody has
Mhm.
the best line you can imagine to then make their exit on. And they actually, funnily enough, kind of make fun of that a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
in the movie where Amanda Seyfried, who's very, very good,
Oh, I would yeah,
she plays William Hurst's, girlfriend, wife,
Mistress.
mistress, whatever you want to call her. Her and Manx strike up a really nice platonic friendship. And there's a moment where he's asking her to then go back to a crowd she just left and tell them something, and she goes, "Well, I can't do that." And he goes, "Why?" And she goes, "You're gonna laugh, but I already made my exit." And so
Yeah.
they kind of hang a lampshade on the fact that everybody in those movies had the best line to leave on, and you can't really go back after that.
Yeah, if at the end of Gone with the Wind, Clark Gable says, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," walks out and then walks back and says, "Oh shit, I forgot my wallet."
Yeah, right. Like, has anyone seen my keys?
Yeah. I love the scene with Arliss Howard and his walk and talk monologue ending with his phony plea to the staff to agree to a 50% pay cut. Like, just that whole scene,
Mhm.
it was just so good, and I think everyone was just so much fun to watch in this.
The
And
performances are really, really great.
yeah, and like you said, Amanda Seyfried, I love the scenes of them together, but I've never really been her biggest fan. I didn't dislike her necessarily, but I wasn't particularly impressed by her. But in this, she was dazzling. I mean, she usually plays kind of the meek, goody good girl, but the confidence and uninhibited bigness of her performance, while also coming off as very natural, was exciting to see. Like, I was just so excited when she was on screen because she was so fun to watch. It feels very big and very acty, but it was also
As those movies back then were supposed to feel.
were, yeah. I really enjoyed it.
They drop you in though without explaining anything. That's why this movie, who's this movie for? Because they don't explain how anything works. They explain who none of the characters are. You mentioned Arliss Howard, who plays Louis B. Mayer, mayor of MGM Studios. They mentioned David O. Selznick. He's also another studio head who was a
Yeah.
Universal studio head. They don't explain who anybody is. They just go in and expect you to know all of this stuff, really kind of how movies work, how the studio system works. If you don't have that prerequisite reading done, I don't know how you would. That's not true. I was going to say I don't know how you'd find
No, but
enjoyment out of it, and that's not fair to say because the performances, like we said, are very good. The movie, the David Fincher directed it. It's beautiful to look at. The sound design is incredible, which is
mhm.
not a thing that you often say.
Like, the echo in the room when, like, I was so surprised. I was like, "Oh, there's an echo when they're talking." That was something that was very prevalent back then, but, like, now you don't hear an echo in the room.
Mhm. Although the old timey movie things that Fincher did it was a little bit too much, a little self indulgent. The cue marks on the screen
Yes, like
bothered
the
me.
cigarette burns and
Yes,
and
that's
all
what those
that, yeah.
little cigarette burns that you see in old movies is when the projectionists would see those, they'd know, "Oh, the reel is ending, I have to change the reels." But it's like, "David Fincher, you shot this digitally. You added that digitally. Don't lie to me."
It
I
was 8K, and they just degraded the crap out of it.
was like, "Okay, too much Fincher." I also you know what bothered me? The slug lines that they would put on, the text when they would go to the flashbacks and they'd
Yeah,
do the
yeah.
script text where it'd be like, "Exterior Club, 1934." But that didn't bother me. The fact that the text went down on the screen bothered me because if you're typing on a typewriter or you hit enter on your screen, the text goes up because the cursor's going down. The text should not be going down on the screen. It's like they hit enter twice and it's like it's going down 2 lines, but that's not how it works. That's not how typewriters or keyboards or word
Mm.
processors work. It bothered me. This didn't bother you. It infuriated me, but
No,
ultimately
it's
I didn't care that much.
I honestly I didn't mind sort of the meta nature of this. It was fun to see David Fincher kind of play in that space. I It was so unlike him. Like, this is not something I would expect David Fincher to make at all.
No, this is a very Oscar baity type of drama. And let's be
Mhm.
honest, David Fincher makes schlocky B movie thrillers. He does them very
Yeah,
well because he's David Fincher, but this is not the type that really the social network is the closest that he's done to doing drama, quote unquote.
Gone Girl.
Gone Girl is a trashy thriller. It's a really well done trashy thriller, but it is a trashy thriller. The book is a trashy thriller in the best way possible. That's what it is. And that's what David Fincher does. He makes movies about serial killers and aliens that chase you in hallways. That's not fair to bring up Alien 3,
But the
but
old film look honestly didn't bother me. I feel like Fincher understands that if you're going to use a quote unquote gimmick, that you need to just lean into it to an almost exaggerated degree. There's this great story he tells where he's talking about David Kep, who wrote Panic Room, and the moment when the cell phone slips under the bed, and he looks at David Kep, he's like, "I'm not doing this. This is this is even true trashy for me. Like, this is a little bit too much." And David Kep's like, "It'll work. Just trust that this scene is going to play well in theaters."
just
And so David Fincher's like, "Okay, well, if we're gonna do this, then I'm going overboard. Like, I'm doubling down. I'm shooting this entire sequence in slow motion, and the sounds and like the pops of the lights and all that." And then so David Kemp's like, "Yeah, you got it." It reminds you like,
Kep's like, "Do it. Do it,
do it.
Fincher."
And he looked at it, he's like, "Yeah, now you know what I'm talking about." And so he did it. He's like, "Okay, it works." I love listening to David Fincher talk about film and his process. I think he is down to earth and straightforward.
His commentaries on his DVDs are great. They are.
He does a great commentary on Chinatown as well with Robert Town.
Mhm.
I think he's doing a show about Chinatown.
Is he really?
Yeah, it's in
I didn't know
production.
that.
Mhm.
By the way, we didn't even mention the titular Mank, Gary Oldman's performance.
I mean, he's phenomenal as
He's
always.
so good as that, but he's also way too old to be playing Mank. Mank is supposed to be in his maybe early to mid 40s, Gary Oldman is pushing 60.
Yeah.
The entire time, and maybe this is a testament to how good he is, I didn't care that he was clearly not the age he was supposed to be, and it didn't even occur to me until the end when it said Mank died
At 55.
in his mid-50s.
Well, there's a scene where he literally says, "I'm 40," or
Yeah,
"I'm 45," yeah.
and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, no, you're not Gary Oldman," but it didn't matter.
He pulled off those witty lines, like,
Yes,
when he turns around and he sees Amanda Seyfried, quote, unquote, "burned at the stake" in the movie scene, and he
when
goes,
we first meet her.
yeah, she goes, "Mank," and he goes, "Huh, what's at stake here?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's good." Like, there's a lot of
Ev
moments where some of
Everyone's
the
got a
puns.
zinger. Charles Dance, also who plays William Randolph Hearst, is
Oh, of
great in his
course.
limited scenes. I mean, I
Oh,
think that Gary Oldman's probably going to get an Oscar for this, and so is
yeah.
basically everybody involved in this.
Everyone was solid. Everyone was so great.
The scene that I think encapsulates it too is at the very end, Mank is giving a speech around a very large
Mhm.
table that William Randolph Hearst is throwing a dinner party, and it's a circus themed dinner party, and Hearst is the ringleader, not an unintentional choice. And Mank shows up and he's drunk and basically giving a pitch for a movie that he wants to do. And he's just drunk and staggering around this table, and all the guests are just repulsed by him, and he's criticizing Hearst in this speech, and Hearst is not mad, he's more bemused than
Mhm.
anything else, and Dance is just kinda looking at him and smiling the whole time, because he knows that nothing Mank does actually matters to him. And that's ultimately what the movie is about, is Mank kinda thinks, "Hey, nothing I do matters, but maybe this one tiny thing can matter a little bit, so I have to do it." But ultimately, William Randolph Hearst was still one of the richest guys in the world. It didn't really matter that Citizen Kane came out and tried to tarnish or trash him, because it didn't. We remember Citizen Kane as being about William Randolph Hearst, but did it really matter? You see all of that on Charles Dance's face in that scene. Maybe I'm projecting that too
No,
onto
no, no.
him.
I do agree in that he is so high above him and
Mhm.
so kind of untouchable that he's almost okay with watching someone squirm on his dining room floor
And then
and
throw up all over
then
it.
throw up all over it, while all of his guests are like, "I'm not sitting here for this." And then they all are starting to get up and he's literally Hearst is the only one sitting at the table by the end of it,
Yes,
and he just kindly puts his arm out and he
and
says,
tells him the
"Come,
parable
yeah,
of
come
the
walk
organ
with me."
grinder's monkey.
And then walks him to the door, and he says, "My driver's gonna drive you home. Have a good night." And it's just this insanely cold exit.
Mhm.
And, when you talk about, okay, who is this for? You really do have to rewatch Citizen Kane before watching this because there are a lot of parallels and themes
Yeah.
and narrative structure. But overall, I truly enjoyed this. And I think that David Fincher, he's a master.
I liked it more as an intellectual exercise than I think I liked it as an emotionally resonating movie, but both are okay.
But I think people were wanting to care about Mank and care about the characters. I don't think I went in even thinking that I would ever get that impression because David Fincher is by definition a very cold filmmaker, and
Yeah,
this is probably as warm as you're gonna get. This is David Fincher's rendition of Trumbo, and Trumbo was a inspiring, heartfelt movie about a great writer in Hollywood, and this is kind of the same thing, but also
made by the guy
not.
who made Zodiac.
Exactly, exactly. But let's move on to Suffer for Good, which is a documentary about Seb Zudi, an almost Olympic boxer whose dreams were cut short when the US banned his home country of Ethiopia from participating in the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. Because at the time, Ethiopia had ties to communist Russia. And so years later, Seb moved to the United States and has since been a boxing coach, but decided that he wants one more bout in the ring. It's an inspirational documentary about his journey and preparation for his first fight in decades and the trials and tribulations that arise. With us to talk about the film is a producer and editor and my longtime friend, David Fish. Welcome to Channel 8.5. How are you, man?
Thank you for having me on. I'm good. It's been an interesting year. It's been an
That
interesting,
it has.
but I suppose it's in the relation to the movie. It's been an interesting 4 years. So
Yeah.
trying to get this thing off the ground. So that being said, we're happy that this movie's finally out at the end what a tumultuous year this has been.
It's a story that needs to be seen at the end of this year, especially because it's a very inspiring story. And boy, 2020 has been anything but inspiring.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for coming on and, and accepting the honor of being our first guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to reconnect with you. I've known for years.
Yeah, I mean, we went to high school together and we took Mr. Robinson's filmmaking class together, which I don't know if you can really call it a filmmaking class.
Yeah, we
It
were
just,
sort of we were like vying for like the best student before student film.
yeah, yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, but it's funny. I remember during his class, we were in it, and like he said, if any of you guys ever win the Oscar or something, you have to name drop my name. So
Yeah.
the fact that we're close, it's now on this podcast. It's very
Yeah,
close.
exactly, exactly.
He's well on his way to notoriety.
Did you ever go back and see him?
I would say maybe like a year or two after,
Yeah, me too,
but
yeah.
I mean it's been a long time. So
Growing up in LA, both of you, because this is something I'm curious about, did everybody want to take the film class, or was it just like hyper competitive in high school film class too?
it was just an elective, I think.
Really?
It
Yeah.
was one of those like fun electives. Like it's either shop, filmmaking, and then some other thing you don't want to take, and it's like okay, cool, filmmaking, I'll take that.
And Miss Robinson was very chill. Like he would basically just play a movie in class every single day.
Yeah.
And we would have a free period to either work on our films, our film projects, because we would have, what was it, like one film a month due?
Yeah, and then it would basically we would like rate or vote on like the best ones, and he would like show them in like
Yeah,
ascending order.
Oh, wow.
exactly. Yeah.
That's savage.
Oh, he was
Yeah,
the he was my favorite. I love when he used to like look and he's like, "Oh, look at that shot! Look at that shot!" Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah. You know what I rewatched today? Pimp
Hmm.
My Sandwich.
Yes,
That
yeah,
was one of
that's
my
my claim to fame.
favorites of yours.
It's funny because when I was promoting this movie last week, to a lot of people whom I haven't talked to since high school, they just know me as like the guy that made that
Yeah.
short film. That's
Excuse me.
super
Excuse
fun.
me. You can't just say the
Yeah.
words "pimp my sandwich" and not explain yourselves, sirs.
Oh, whoever wants to,
No,
you
no,
want to
please,
describe
David.
it.
I mean, I
It's
know you're here to talk about Suffer for Good, but we want to hear about Pimp My Sandwich as well.
there was a lot of suffering going on even that many years ago. No, so
Yeah.
back in the day when there was a TV channel called MTV that actually showed music videos and other content, there was a show called Pimp My
Uh-huh.
Ride with Exhibit. So we've just been a spoof that was like somebody had a really terrible like PB&J that was look
That
what
is
was it
fun.
like we like poked a bunch of holes in it and then we said we
Yeah.
took it to Compton and like yeah, so we had some guy like pimp his sandwich.
It's a lot of fun. Church.
Yeah. Those are fun days.
Yeah, those were fun days.
That was like 2005, 2006. That was like one of the first things I uploaded to YouTube.
Oh, yeah, 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 that's right. That's when I mean, YouTube was just starting to come up at that time. But after high school, you went to CSUN's film school, and then you produced video content for NBC Universal as well as LA Music Blog. And then you started IDFI Media, and yeah, what are you up to right now?
So I'm still doing freelance work through my IDFi LLC. I'm primarily just like a single proprietor, like this is me, doing like
Yeah,
editing for clients. And so the guy that directed Suffer for Good, Danny Simmons, he's been a great friend of mine for many years. And he is also commercial director. He's been throwing just projects my way since our working relationship with Suffer for Good just
yeah,
blossomed. And so I'm steadily working with him on projects for multiple clients. It's technically in the social space, but
yeah.
at some point we're looking for like bigger projects. At least after Suffer for Good's out and everybody's caught on that. Oh, these guys do this kind of awesome, cool work. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, how did you become involved with the project, and what about Seb's story really kind of sparked your interest to sign on as a producer and editor?
Yeah. So when I first met Danny, he was in improv. And so a lot of his content was in comedy. He would just throw stuff my way that was I would say sophomoric. I thought it was funny still because, we were young, 20, whatever.
Yeah,
And so, trying to get on like the Bro Bible channel on like, and Snapchat was building up. So that was a thing. But
yeah,
at the time, Danny was working at Sony Pictures, and he's huge. He used to be a baseball pitcher, almost made the major leagues, but he's just a huge sports guy. And so at Sony Pictures, Seb Zudi was a boxing coach for the employees there.
mhm,
And Danny just grew a rapport with him and a friendly relationship and learned about his story. And Danny thought, whatever, he didn't go to film school, but he had a camera. He got the Sony camera, the latest
Yeah.
DSLRs there on the cheap, and started filming a day in the life of Seb Zudi.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he had enough footage to assemble some sort of like little trailer. And when he reconnected with me back at 20th Century Fox when I was working there, he showed me this little trailer. And I thought, this can't just be the whole story. It can't just be this 2 minute, like, let's wrap it up in 2 minutes. This guy's story's way too interesting.
Yeah.
So I told him it's got to be something longer than this, and it's got to be feature. So he basically was like, well, if you want to help me out and produce this project with me, and go into this deep dive venture into this man's life who we just obtained the life rights for, then yeah, that you're more than welcome to do it. So
Yeah.
I said, yeah, his story is way too important
Yeah.
not to be this little small blip. So I decided to join.
So at the time, it was basically just a day in the life. So had he decided at that time to go back into boxing and take that final fight?
No. So, as you've seen in the movie, he is a boxing coach in Culver City and he works at this Alliance gym and he teaches boxing and MMA. And so, initially, that's all it was. Is this guy's a teacher, he has a protege named Jared, and so he wants Jared to be a pro boxer. And
Yeah.
so the whole story starts off with the trainee and the trainer relationship, and Seb has this desire to be back in the Olympics, and he really wants his protege to be potentially the successor of what he couldn't achieve
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
And so that relationship, as we were filming it, doesn't work out that way. We sort of show it in the movie. It's not. The movie started out as being that was the arc, and then
Yeah.
that changed when Seb decided he wanted it for himself. He wanted that glory, so he was like, "Yeah, I want to go back to at least box my last fight, or
Yeah.
what would maybe be his last fight because of his age."
Yeah.
And so that's where the story started to turn, I would say, like midway through production.
The way you frame that, it worked very effectively too, as this is a man who is getting older, he's in his 50s, and boy, did I think that it was being set up for this dude's gonna die in that ring.
Yeah,
And it hit
yeah.
you. You did really well of making you care about Seb's story too, which is really commendable.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's interesting because at the end, Jesse, one of his other proteges, says, he's got the mind of Yoda. Like mentally, he's immortal. Like he's a super tough guy, but it's the age that's defining him, which he doesn't let up. He knows that ultimately, age does not define him.
It feels like his frustration with Jared is that Jared is physically capable of maybe what he was when he was younger, and he has the mental fortitude to work as hard as he thinks that Jared should be working to attain success. And it's almost that frustration you see on him. He's just like, God, if I just had your body and that age, right now. And I think you guys did a great job of maintaining not only the overall arc of Seb's journey to get back into the ring, but also the side stories of Jared and Jesse and sort of his effect on his proteges and his students in a sense. So it is almost tragic the way that Seb feels about, Jared's.
He feels disappointed. He feels disappointed in Jared a lot of times, going, "If you don't train the way that I'm telling you to, I will not train you anymore."
Yeah, I mean, you see, I would say a larger part of the movie that we initially had in an older cut was the history section where you learn a little bit about Ethiopia and the wars and who's in the regime and like where Seb's upcoming or upbringing happened. And so I think what you see in Seb and the mentality he brings to Jared, at least as because he sees Jared as his son. I mean, he has his own sons who are in the movie
Mhm.
and are like the best part of the movie, and everybody wants to hug
Oh, yeah.
Matty because
Yeah.
he's the coolest dude. But he treats Jared like his own son too, and I think he, based on his upbringing too, has this idea that like if you don't work hard, then you don't necessarily deserve where you are in that moment.
Yeah.
It's like tough love.
Well, and the word suffer is really a theme in the entire film. It's a through line. Even as kids use that sort of mantra throughout the film when they're speaking to each other, speaking to him.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you left on the cutting room floor that you wish you could have included or maybe cut for pacing or that just didn't fit in the structure?
There were a couple fights that we did not include that I think better conceive the arc of Jared being the protege and Seb being the trainer. I guess they fulfilled those aspects of that arc.
Yeah.
Ultimately, as cool as they were and as nail biting as those fights were, even, we saw the larger grand scheme, which was more about Seb's journey and less about Jared's journey. And we
Yeah.
also didn't want to like overweight Jared over his other students, who I think are still very important to Seb's story. And
Yeah.
so I think that we had to drop, and more again, the history section was whittled down from being this 20-minute. To me, it's fascinating. I think
Yeah.
it's a slog to other people though. So I think we didn't want to turn this into like a History Channel biography.
Yeah.
We wanted just to be, this is Seb, this is all about him. Let's just get, cut from A to B.
It's interesting because the show that sort of sparked the string of sports related movies that we've done in the last couple shows was The Queen's Gambit, which took
Mm,
place in the Cold War. And it's
yeah.
interesting that we're now coming back full circle to talk about Seb's story, whose dreams were cut short because of the proxy wars and all of the, the political conflict between US and Russia. So I mean, I agree. I would find that very fascinating as well, but I could see why you felt like, okay, it might slow the pacing down at that moment.
Yeah, because you really need to understand that moment before the preceding moments. There was a lot that we rearranged in this
Yeah.
movie. We were like, should we have the history section over here? Do we introduce Jesse over here? Do we preview Seb's fight in the beginning and then give it breadcrumbs, give it like throughout the
Mm.
movie? Do we have like a countdown to how many days the fights are?
Yeah.
So there were a lot of ways that we were thinking about going about it. I think there are ways that maybe I would have preferred a little more, but I think we found a good happy medium.
No, I completely agree. And I think you guys nailed the progression of the arc and introduced the different people at times that correlated with Seb's journey. You were saying you had a lot of footage, though. About how many hours would you say you had?
It's a great question. The because this movie took about 2 years to edit
Oh, wow.
completely, which is crazy because the movie is only like 70
Wow.
minutes. But as soon, because I was telling you, like the whole Jared arc, we dialed back because now Seb wanted to do this fight. So there was all that footage that we had already edited, and then we were like, all right, Seb wants to do this fight. Now it's a whole new nugget just thrown into the pile. So I don't want to calculate how many hours there were. I can just tell you there were like a zillion.
A
It
lot.
felt like
A
it,
lot is the
right?
answer.
Yeah, yeah, many. I would say at least 100 to 200 hours.
Dear Lord.
Yeah.
So I imagine you were excited when Seb decided, you know what? I want to fight. I want to do this because I think it adds a great foundation for his overall arc. But was a part of you thinking, oh God, we're going to have to restructure this entire thing? Like, what was your reaction at that point?
No, I thought it would benefit the story. To be totally honest,
Yeah.
I thought it was crucial that this happened because it just fit with his mantra.
Yeah.
So I think I think it helped elevate it. To be honest.
Do you feel like the production of the documentary kind of influenced that decision on his part? Like maybe in the interviews when he's telling his story and talking about his experience, the introspection that comes with that sort of inspired that decision?
I would say if you knew Seb Zudi, he's very much somebody that is still sort of clinging to that, like wanting to be victorious and wanting to be the guy
Yeah.
that everybody knows his name. So I think initially when you're like, okay, you're gonna make a movie about my life, that's cool. And then you go into these interviews and you're asked all these questions and you're sort of like, yeah, like this is cool. This is a lot of
Yeah.
fun. So I think ultimately through this movie, he's like, you know what? I want to fight. I want to do this thing. I want to be a big name, and that's why I think he took it.
Well, it makes sense that
Yeah,
through his recounting of his almost shot at competing at the Olympics that he realized that he was lacking closure that he needed.
yeah, for sure.
There was a moment, I will say too, when he does start to train and he's running up this giant hill. And it's a great shot and you can see just how steep this incline is. I'll be honest, the first thing that crossed my mind though was, boy, I hope that camera's in a trailer and they didn't have to lay some dolly track because I would hate to be that camera guy.
Yeah, we did not.
No,
That was all in a car.
yeah.
What were the highlights and lowlights of the production? I know you said it was what, 4 years it took to get this thing kind of off the ground. What, in your opinion, are kind of the most difficult moments, and then the moments that you're particularly proud of of?
When I started the project, it was this little thing, and then I said to expand it. And there were questions as to how we would be able to afford to continue to do anything because Danny just had his little, his DSLR camera. I had my own camera that I could provide. So these were all like Sony DSLRs. And
Yeah.
so we had to figure out like, well, what can we do to like elevate this? And so we hired on another producer. His name is Ben Guercio, and he was able to bring a cinema camera that was another
Mhm.
Sony camera. So we can almost say this movie's actually we can say this movie was shot entirely on Sony, and so that helped elevate certain moments, especially in the sequences where you see Seb. He's training. He's on the not the recumbent bike, but he's on the rowing machine,
Mhm.
and it's intercut with Seb like fighting in slow motion, or he's shadow boxing in slow motion. So
Yeah.
all of those sequences are shot on these cinema grade cameras, and then you have these sort of grittier moments where it's just Jared and Seb in a room, and Jared's punching him in the stomach, and
Mhm.
Seb's like egging him on. So like in those moments, they're like super handheld and not so like studio.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of all of these different media sources too. So that I think was a huge challenge. And what I guess I'm really proud of is that it all looks very cohesive. It never really feels like
Yeah.
different media types. It all just has this very fluid, almost gritty, atmospheric cinematography,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I really owe to Danny because he just knows that equipment so well that he was able
Mhm.
to transform and color it in a way that makes it all very seamless. And as far as like for me being a post guy, audio I think was sort of a misstep in the sense of like I just wish we did have like less sources to
Yeah.
source from because you're dealing with people on labs, and then you're dealing with archival footage, and you're dealing with a lot of handheld movement, so a lot of like scratches or stuff that you sort of have to take out and post. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe things should have been a little more streamlined, but I not to say, overall it's a great experience.
Yeah. I mean, all of that is part of the learning experience on set where you come out of it thinking, okay, next time let's streamline the sound. And that is part of the fun of filmmaking is that you're not only constantly problem solving, but also you never really stop learning. For every project that I've wrapped, I've come out of it having learned something new that I can carry into future projects. And what would you say this project taught you, or what would you take from this project and carry it into your future films?
Yeah, things that I would learn out of this film are to have a budget. No, just to have a budget for like specifically have a budget for sound. As an editor, sound is like such a crucial and important part of any movie. I think it's taken a little bit for granted. So I just
Mhm.
think somebody that could help like sweeten the deal would be just fantastic. And otherwise, I think we did a great job, and I just want to be a part of Seb's story
Yeah.
and have it be told and have people see it and feel inspired by it.
No, and it really is a very inspirational story, especially the faith he has in himself. So much so that when his son asks him, can I bet on you? And he says, yeah, of course you can.
Yeah.
And we can probably put a spoiler alert right now, and I can put timestamps in the description if you haven't seen it yet. But I don't think it was really about whether he won or lost. He just wanted to feel what it was like in the ring again. And if anything, gain some closure that he otherwise wouldn't have
Well,
gotten.
that's what's so fascinating about the movie is he you kind of don't even know at the end if Seb really truly understands the moral because it's like yeah he still has the mentality to win, and you do want him to win in
Yeah.
respect, but it almost is for the story better that he lost because you see the people around him say it doesn't matter that all these things happen. His I don't know if I'm spoiling anything, but family members passed away. He
Hmm.
deals with a lot in regards to the aftermath of his Olympics, the ban on the Olympics, the Doctor Hode story. There's so much that he's dealing with that he doesn't really see. He just wants to suffer.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily want to feel like he's lost. It's
Yeah.
okay that he lost.
It almost feels like sometimes I think as long as you're suffering, that it almost feels like you're actually doing something worthwhile. And he wants to grind no matter what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
I will say one moment in the edit that stood out to me was when the doctor was talking about Seb's heart procedure, and she's talking about the blood flow in his heart, and then you overlaid these drone shots flying over the red seats of the Coliseum, which gives the impression of blood flowing. And I just love that you found a way of correlating the two. I remember thinking, oh, that's David's editing. I love that.
A lot of people point out there's a scene. It's after Jesse's introduced and we see his fight, and uh, Jesse wins the fight, and everybody's celebrating, and so you see the aftermath of the fight, and they're all happy, and then it cuts back to the gym, which is totally empty, and Seb is there training, and then the music is still pumping up from the fight, but Seb puts down
Oh
the
yeah.
weights and the music cuts
Mhm.
out.
Hmm.
That was me. That's a David edit.
That stood out as well. Like the sound of like the clunk, and then the music just cuts.
Yeah, everybody seems to get a kick out of that. They're like, "What?" It's sort of you taken aback, like, well, the music cuts out, and you're like, "Okay, back into reality."
Yeah.
Seb is training, and he's all by himself.
I found this film particularly interesting because a few years back I had joined a boxing gym for a
Oh,
bit. I
cool.
mean, it was at first it was just for fitness, and then I just grew to love it. And I would spar every once in a while. I wasn't seriously pursuing it or anything like that, but watching this definitely made me want to go back to it. But I loved in Seb's fight scene the way you isolated specific moments, be it hits he takes or a swing he dodges. But also when Jared is punching Seb when he's up against the wall,
Yeah,
Seb is just like, no, go harder, keep going. And he's like, I'm going to hurt you. And he's like, no, just go. And it's almost as though Seb doesn't even realize his own limitations, which is so interesting. He is a
absolutely.
very interesting person. And it just made sense why you guys decided to back him with making this film.
Yeah, a lot of people also after they see the movie, they're like, "Man, I really want to work out again,
Yeah,
or right now."
yeah. No, he's
Yeah.
a very inspirational individual.
Yeah, we had a few screenings last year. We also were in festivals, and a lot of responses were incredibly positive, and people came up to us after the movie. Not just me, but I mean, obviously around Seb, and they just wanted to get to meet him. I mean, it
Yeah.
was great that people were able to see him, and I want to say while he's still here, he's alive. He's not. I don't want to like throw anybody off. He's not in Los
Yeah.
Angeles anymore, though. He actually moved to Nashville.
Oh, did he really?
He did, yeah, so he moved his family there because, LA is just way too expensive
Yeah.
these days, so they moved to Nashville late last year, I think, and so he's got his own working, gym there, training students, but people that got to see him while he was here in LA, they fell in love, and no matter what, I think they'll fall in love with him and his story wherever they are. We're hoping to maybe go out to Nashville at some point after this whole COVID thing is over and do some sort of screening there.
Oh,
That
cool,
way they
yeah.
can be there. The film is also available worldwide, so we're hoping that people even in Ethiopia get the chance to see this.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, where can people find the film?
Yeah, they can find Separate for Good on Amazon, iTunes / Apple TV, Vudu, Google Play Store, Xbox, PlayStation, the gamut of digital platforms to
Yeah.
rent or own. We're going to see where it goes, and hopefully next year we'll be on even more services for availability around the world.
No, it's exciting, and it's always good to see a fellow filmmaker put something out, and, I know how much work it takes, and congratulations, man, and you guys did a great
It's
job.
a really cool
Thank
story.
you,
It's a great
appreciate
flick,
it.
man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No, and thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective and your experience with it, and hopefully we'll have you back on for the next one.
Yeah, hopefully the next one's maybe a narrative feature, not so
Yeah,
much a
yeah.
documentary.
Yeah,
one
I
one
feel
that
you.
takes one that takes a year or less.
Yeah, yeah,
You're welcome anytime. Come on down.
yeah.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, definitely check out Suffer for Good. But I think that wraps this week's Watchlist episode. If you've seen Selena, Mank, or Suffer for Good, let us know what you thought. Did you agree or disagree with anything we discussed? Catch us on next week's episode where we'll be discussing non-Christmas movies set at Christmas time. As we've mentioned before, we are shooting to reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube to become partners, so if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. If you have any ideas for a theme you'd like us to discuss, or a film, TV show, anything pop culture, let us know on YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find all those links on channel8.5.com. That's channel8.5, completely spelled out.com.
We have new episodes every Thursday. Until next time, my name is Joe Galena.
And I'm Andrew Hanna, and this is Channel 8.5.